Good evening and welcome. Tonight we are going to be going over a brief history and geography of Armenia. And something that I need to say first, something that I really don't want to say but I have to, is that I will be discussing certain sensitive topics that, for a variety of reasons, are very debated. So, if you know, you know. But let me just say that if you're going to leave a comment denying any certain aspects of history, it will be deleted. If you want to leave a comment degrading any nationality or peoples, it will be deleted. Armenia's had a very long and very strenuous history, full of turmoil, I suppose. It's gone through a lot, so I'm not going to tolerate any kind of anti-anyone in my comments in this video or in any of my videos. That's just not the energy I am bringing for this channel. This is not a who's right and who's wrong channel. This is just a factual history of countries around the world, spoken in a relaxing voice to help put you to sleep, basically. So, without further ado, Armenia. I just realized I said that like African Kosa ASMR. But anyway, I'm obsessed with her channel right now. But anyway, Armenia. So I bought this atlas because it is the most up-to-date official maps of everywhere around the world, and because of very recent events, this map is now somewhat outdated. So let me show you why with its borders. Armenia borders Georgia to its north, which I just did a video on. They have a lot of shared history, well, at least during one point in their history they share some commonalities. So if you haven't watched that, be sure to check that out. It's really interesting in my opinion. Armenia borders Azerbaijan to the east and to the west. Azerbaijan has an exclave, a big one, right here. Armenia kind of cutting it off from the rest of Azerbaijan. Also to its east, Armenia borders what is to some people known as the Republic of Artsakh, officially known as Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, this is where it gets tricky because, as you can see, it's gray on the map, which means it's a disputed territory. So the borders have changed as of September 2020. I kind of put some very light pencil marks just to help me show you guys where approximately they are, but very light so I don't damage the map too much. So essentially this chunk right here officially now belongs to Azerbaijan, as well as this big chunk down here. This area up here is a no man's land, and there is now a section right here. I'm trying to see my mark. Yeah, like right here, that's like a little tunnel that belongs to both Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's currently occupied by the Russian military to ensure the ceasefire agreements being upheld, but it's like a corridor to link Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia. So we'll obviously talk more about that in a little bit, but Armenia borders all of that to its east. To its south, it has this border with Iran, and to the west, it has this border with Turkey, which is also very important in its history for a variety of reasons. One of the most important being that this part of Turkey, which I've kind of covered up with this book, we'll flip through it after I go over the history. Here we go, Turkey. One of the reasons it's so important is that this whole region of Turkey down here used to be part of the ancient country of Armenia, and most notably is Mount Ararat. which is right here, is a very, very sacred place to Armenians, culturally and religiously. It's said, according to, I guess, the Bible, that Noah's Ark landed on top of this mountain, and Armenians consider themselves the descendants of Noah. I think, if I remember correctly, Noah's grandson was the one who officially established Armenia. So that's very important to Armenia. The capital city up here is Yerevan. And this area over here is one of the flattest in Armenia, so you can see the mountain in it, the Yerevan skyline. It's really beautiful. Other major cities in Armenia include Gyumri up here and Vanadzor over here. But most of Armenia is incredibly mountainous. Armenia is part of the Lesser Caucasus Mountains, and they flow pretty much all down this area here. And the geographic feature that stands out the most, especially on this map, is this big lake. This is Lake Sevan. And as you can tell, it's gigantic. And it's up high in the mountains. And it's just a really beautiful place. There are some forested areas. You can see one of the national parks right here. There's one down here. There are lots of rivers flowing all throughout Armenia. The biggest being the Araksh River, which makes up this whole border all the way down here. Oop, there we go. But yeah, lots of rivers flow through Armenia stemming from the river or coming from the lake. The highest point in Armenia is Mount Aragats, which you can see right here. But lots and lots of mountains run all through Armenia. And they're really beautiful, obviously, being in the part of Western Asia that they're in. Lots of snow and trees and animals, things like that. It's absolutely gorgeous landscape. So in a nutshell, that's the geography of Armenia, at least the physical geography. We'll go a little bit more into political geography throughout its history. So let's dive right in. People have been living in this area for a long, long, long time. The oldest civilization would have been established here around 4000 BCE. And also, the world's oldest leather shoe has been found in what is now Armenia, along with the world's oldest wine producing factory, kind of like workshop. If you see my Georgia video, you know that the first like wine barrels and things like that were discovered in Georgia, but it was in Armenia where the first sort of, not industry because it was ancient times, but like a producing center was first created. So it was in the year 2107 BCE, where according to legend, the hero Haik established the ancient realm of Armenia. And it's a very interesting story. Maybe one day I'll have a whole video on it. But in a nutshell, Haik fought the king of Babylon because the king there was asserting too much power. So Haik fled and fought a war against him and won very successfully. That's a very short version of the legend. But there's actually a lot of historical, archaeological evidence proving some aspects of the story. So like I said, maybe there'll be a whole video on it one day. It's really cool. There were a lot of ancient kingdoms and things like that that sprung up in this territory during that time. The largest would have been Urartu, or the Kingdom of Van, which you can kind of see down here is Lake Van. It's a huge lake in what used to be ancient Armenia. Over time, many different ancient empires and cultures took over this territory. First would have been the Assyrians. Can't remember who was after that, but eventually it was the Persians of the Achaemenid Empire who controlled this region, which you can learn a lot about if you watch my series on Iran. But eventually, if you know the history of the Persian Empire, they were taken over by Alexander the Great. His empire split up, so this territory came under the control of the Seleucid Empire, which around this time Armenia saw its golden age under Tigranes the Great, who ruled from 95 to 66 BCE. A bit later, in the year 40 CE, two apostles of Jesus Christ came into the area and started preaching Christianity. And in the year 301, Armenia declared itself a Christian nation, the first country in the world to do so. And this was declared by Tiridates III. Eventually, this area was incorporated into the Sasanian Empire, another version of the Persian Empire. The Armenians resisted this control at first. In 451, they fought a very huge battle over it, and essentially Armenia was allowed its autonomy and its right to practice its Christian religion and not the Islam religion that the Sasanians practiced. Eventually, the Sasanian Empire fell apart. Armenia managed to regain its independence in the year 884, and for a while it was controlled by the Bagratuni dynasty, which again you can learn about in my video on Georgia. It's around this time, like I said, that Armenia and Georgia share a history, because at this time they were ruled by the same king or kingdom dynasty for a while. But eventually the Byzantine Empire conquered this area in 1045, and not long after that, in 1071, the Seljuk Turks swept in and took control of the area. The current ruler fled and went to the Taurus Mountains, which you definitely cannot see on this map. It's much further south from what you can see here. And they established the Armenian Kingdom of Cilicia in order to try to preserve their culture and way of life. Eventually, the Seljuk Empire crumbled, and the Armenians managed to reclaim their ancestral territory in about the early 12th century. However, in the 1230s, the Mongols invaded and completely devastated the area. Over the years, the territory was ruled by various different Muslim tribes, but many years later, Armenia was essentially split into two, with the western half being controlled by the Ottoman Empire and the eastern half being controlled by the Safavid Empire, which was the current version of the Persian Empire. The Ottoman-Persian Wars were fought over these territories, as you can imagine, and later the Russo-Persian Wars were fought over this area, the result of which allowed Russia to claim this territory from Persia, and it became part of Russia. Meanwhile, in the west, which again covered up by the book here we go, the Armenians living in this territory, which again was their ancestral home for forever, they were very persecuted by the Ottoman Empire. There were a variety of massacres and other horrors that these people went through, but none so much as in 1915 when the Armenian Genocide began. By 1918, 1 to 1.5 million Armenians had been killed at that time. And like I said in the beginning, if you want to deny this genocide, your comment will be deleted. I'm not putting up with that. Again, this is just a facts video. I'm not going into any of the details about it. The fact is that millions of Armenians lost their lives during this time, lost their homes, lost their identity during this time. But this event did create a huge diaspora of Armenians, and there are actually more Armenians today living outside of Armenia than there are in Armenia, mostly in the United States and Canada, and in Eastern European countries, and quite a few of these countries that border Armenia as well. In 1917, the Russian Empire collapsed. The Tsars was overthrown by the Bolsheviks, and the territories that the Russians had taken over were just kind of left high and dry, just sort of left to their own devices. So this area tried to make a little coalition of themselves, but eventually Armenia declared its independence on May 28th, I didn't write down the year, 19? Oh, I feel so bad. I didn't write it down. I'll clarify it here. But they declared independence. I think it was 19. We'll see. They declared their independence, but it didn't last long because the Soviet Union, which Russia had turned into, wound up annexing this area in 1922 and absorbed it into their country. Armenia didn't see any World War II combat, but of course, being a part of Russia, many Armenians fought for the Russians in Europe against the Axis powers. And since the area was not very well off at the time, it actually kind of flourished in a way under Soviet control, in that it modernized a few things, at least in Soviet terms. I guess in terms of like architecture and organization, things like that, kind of helped out the people for quite a few decades. By the 1980s, it all kind of started to begin to fall apart, and the Soviet Union imposed what they called glasnost, which not only made the government more transparent, but allowed the people to sort of voice more of their concerns. Mainly in Armenia, the concern was two major things. One was the environment, because the Soviets didn't have a lot of concern for cleaning the environment. They were widely polluting anywhere. Not to mention, they really loved that nuclear energy. It was kind of like a symbol of Soviet power and control. And this area is actually very seismically active. They had a huge earthquake in 1988, which only raises concerns about nuclear plants operating in this area. I think it was I didn't write this down either. I think it was a 7.2 earthquake, which devastated the country in many, many ways. The other big concern was Nagorno-Karabakh, which had been its autonomous region during Soviet control. So once the Soviet Union kind of started to fall apart, they wanted to become part of Armenia because the area is predominantly Armenian, but geographically part of Azerbaijan. So there were many protests about it. Over time, the Russians responded by firing on the protesters, which is never a good idea. It only makes things much, much worse. And eventually, on September 21st, 1991, Armenia declared its independence. Not long after that, Azerbaijan and Armenia began fighting a very vicious war over Nagorno-Karabakh. And that lasted until 1994, when Russia helped to negotiate a ceasefire, which just left everything in limbo, not one or the other. Of course, as I said at the beginning, these people declared their independence, but nobody recognizes it. And it remained that way until September 27th, 2020, when Azerbaijan fired upon the region and began to attack it, mostly due to the fact that they had very advanced weapons from their close allies, Turkey. Very advanced weapons that Armenia did not have at its disposal, so it was a pretty unfair advantage. Azerbaijan swept through the area, and just as they were about to attack the capital area, they had captured Shusha, one of the major cities, but they were heading toward the capital. Armenia officially surrendered before they could ransack that area. And once again, Russia helped to negotiate a ceasefire. The borders that I pointed out at the beginning were established, and like I said, the Russian soldiers are occupying the area for the next 5 years in order to maintain the ceasefire. So in terms of this territory, it's very up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen, if it's going to be a peaceful transition from one country to the other, if it won't be a peaceful transition from one country to the other. If maybe they appeal to the UN and try to confirm their independence claim, we really do not know what will happen. And of course, with the Russians involved, who know if they'll be like, oh, we'll just claim it for Russia. We don't know. Meanwhile, in Armenia, the public was very upset over the surrender and the conditions of the ceasefire, because basically Armenia lost this war. Huge protests erupted in late 2020 and early 2021. Many calls for the prime minister to resign. The prime minister at this point in time, right now it's April 2021 as I'm filming this, the prime minister has said that he will step down and new elections will be held in June 2021. So we don't know how that's going to go either. So basically, everything is very much up in the air for Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan. We'll just kind of have to wait and see what happens and hope that whatever happens, it results in the most peaceful and less harmful result possible. So let's flip through the book. I'll show you some pictures of Armenia. Armenia has these absolutely gorgeous churches because it being the oldest Christian nation, it has some very old, beautiful churches. And they have their own church. They have their own Armenian church with their own form of worship, architecture, dress, all of that. It's really beautiful. Speaking of beautiful, look at these fantastic mountains. Gorgeous. Look at the clouds rolling through. Amazing. What a sight. Here is one of their ancient sites. This is Svartnots, temple built from 641 to 661. That, I believe, sustained damage from the earthquake in 1988. A lot of ancient buildings crumbled, and I know some were rebuilt, but some were not. Some Armenians, and a political map. You can see where Armenia is in the world. Look at this scenery. Just splendid. Beautiful green. Little river winding through the valley. So beautiful. Here's Mount Ararat. And this church, I believe, was the very first church built in Armenia, under the backdrop of the mountain. Here's a physical map of Armenia, so you can really see how mountainous it is. Incredibly mountainous terrain. Here's another building that was ruined during the earthquake in 1988. Here is Lake Sevan, another beautiful Armenian church. This talks about some of the droughts that have occurred lately and a beautiful winter going sledding in the snow. One of the nuclear power plants in Armenia, a little relic of their Soviet days. Beautiful tree. This is the Judas tree. And of course, these books always have pictures of sheep somewhere. There's some shepherds. Another gorgeous scenic picture. Look at the flowers and the valley. So gorgeous. And this lovely river flowing through the forest. You can almost hear the little babbling noises as it makes, rolling through the forest. Another gorgeous scenery. So gorgeous. Farm here, down here, the mountains, the river. Gorgeous. There's some pretty flowers. Which ones do you like best? I think I like this one the best. Here's some mountain goats called mouflon. They're big horns. And here's a big bear going roar, roar, roar. We've got an otter, one of my favorite animals. Isn't he cute? I love otters. And a striped hyena, which is incredibly endangered in the region. And this has a skink, a big kind of lizard. Now, speaking of reptiles, there is a snaky snake on the next page. So if you're sensitive to pictures of snaky snakes, just be warned that it's coming up. Just look away or dim your screen. Here we go. We have a snaky snake. It's an Armenian viper. It's kind of cute, in my opinion. A seagull and some pelicans. Alright, the snake is gone. And we have another gorgeous scenic picture of this big waterfall rushing through. This is so lovely. Imagine being up here and hearing the waterfall rushing down. Or being on this bridge and looking up. So lovely. Okay, so this picture, I was staring at it way too long, and I really wish this caption wasn't up here, because according to the little note here, it says it's an illustration of a birthday feast of the King of Armenia, and like, this guy is holding a baby or a small person who's tooting a horn, trumpet thing, and these guys are just like, could you not? They look very upset about it. This looks like the king, this looks like the queen, maybe a prince, and they're like, can you put the baby away? Like, kind of ruining our feast here. We got our fish and our bread and our wine. Could you, maybe they look really like, this guy's just going doo doo doo. He looks kind of upset about it too. I really want to know what's happening here. Beautiful graveyard. This always tells us so much about history. Here's some Persian art, which I believe this is from Persepolis. They had a lot of artwork like this, the soldiers. A little map here that shows present-day Armenia. You can see how big the Persian Empire was, how big Alexander's empire was, how big the Roman Empire reached, grabbed all of Armenia there. There's some Roman soldiers right there. And this is Garni, which was a summer home for many Roman generals, and it included this big temple so they could still worship. Here is Gregory the Illuminator, another big component in establishing Christianity in Armenia, and was the founder of the Armenian Church. I think this is him baptizing the king. This is Vartan Mamikonian, who fought against the Persians, and here is a Persian battle. Another map where you can see present-day Armenia and all of the different lands that controlled it, and some Ottoman fighters. You can tell because they're wearing big turbans, like their trademark. We have the capture of Yerevan Fortress. You can see the Russian soldiers coming into Yerevan. This is Abdul Hamid II, who was involved in many Armenian massacres. And here's a refugee camp. Many Armenians were driven from their home, forced marches, horrible things like that. This is the eternal flame to commemorate those who perished during the Armenian Genocide. And here's a photo from the first Nagorno-Karabakh War in the 1990s. Armenia today. Right here. Of course, this border is different now. This was the president at the time the book was out, Robert Kacharian. We have some Russian soldiers over here helping out with the ceasefire agreement. This would be Vazgen Sargsyan, not sure, who was prime minister and was very sadly assassinated. Some Armenians, their beautiful flag. Let's read about it. It says, the flag of the Republic of Armenia consists of 3 horizontal stripes of red, blue, and gold. The design was confirmed on August 24th, 1990, and is identical to Armenia's first state flag, which flew from 1918 to 1921, Red represents the bloodshed by Armenians who were fighting for their country, religion, and independence. Blue represents the country's sky, rivers, and lakes. Orange represents the country's resources. The first president of Armenia was Levanter Petrosian, otherwise known as LTP. This is the National Assembly building. And there's a lady voting. Some Armenian soldiers. Here you can see Yerevan with Mount Ararat in the background. So gorgeous, what a scene. This would be the Republic Square in the center of Yerevan. You can see it right here on the map. Downtown Yerevan, I suppose we would call it in the States, like your historic area. These guys are building a wall. This person selling fruit. This person looks like harvesting corn, I suppose. And this guy's getting some yummy, yummy grapes to make into wine. More sheep. These books always have to have sheep in it somewhere. And some obsidian rock, which is a volcanic rock that is mined in Armenia. Some more resources. You can see lots of cereals and cotton is also grown here, as well as livestock grazing up in the beautiful mountains. This is a textile factory and from a shoe factory. Example of their currency, the Armenian dram. We have a little railway station. I like this picture. Guy reading his newspaper. Should probably get some glasses here, a little too close. And this indoor market, doesn't that look fun to shop in? Walking through all the stalls here. Lots of sounds and smells in there. Here is a little trolley. Very cute. And a scene from rural Armenia. Getting some sticks. Are those sheep too? They certainly are. There's always sheep in these books. Some beautiful faces. Looking wonderful. And here you can really see where people live in Armenia. Mostly concentrated down here where it's not as mountainous, but still lots of people up there as well. Let's see. Getting onto the bus. Perfect picture of jump rope. Look at that. Great shot. This person selling some apples and pears. An example of a little village in Armenia. Let's see, ethnic distribution. You can see it's majority Armenian. It's 93% Armenian. Working hard at school. Example of the Armenian script, and this is a statue of Mesrop Mashtots, who invented the Armenian alphabet. Look at her. She says, "Behold." Another good example of a beautiful Armenian church, and a really beautiful example of Armenian Bibles. Those are fantastic. So these are the two apostles that came to the area to preach Christianity, Saints Thaddeus, I'm not sure, and Bartholomew. This painting apparently depicts the Roman soldiers converting to Christianity. And these are big stone markers. See, chars, probably butchered that, but they would be erected to commemorate events or memorials, things like that. This is the most important church in Armenia, Echmiadzin. I hope I said that right. But it was I believe it was like the first church built. And it is the home of the head of the Armenian church. This is pretty much what priests wear, the hood and the robes and everything like that. Very distinctly Armenian Christianity. Some people worshiping at a church service. and painting art by the lake. Some beautiful modern art. Let's see what else we have. Very lovely woman in traditional Armenian clothes playing the traditional Armenian kanun instrument. Here's Khachaturian, famous composer from Armenia. This is the opera building and ballet theater, it says. What an Armenian wedding would look like. And some colorful stamps. Soccer is, of course, a very big sport in this area of the world, as in many areas of the world, but they also really love wrestling. A lot of chess champions come from Armenia. Of course, skiing is huge with all those mountains and snow. Selling some carrots and potatoes, it looks like. A nurse working in the hospital. An example of some Armenian homes in Yerevan, looking very Soviet, very blocky and big. The statue of Mother Armenia. Big Ferris wheel. And here's some examples of traditional Armenian costumes for the men. This gorgeous fit. And for the women, it's just lovely. I love their traditional clothes. Nardi, which is backgammon, very beloved game in this area of the world. And this is from Vartavar, which is a festival where you basically just dump water on strangers. Sounds like fun. And a lovely picnic out. Fantastic. Oh, that's the end. That's it for the video tonight. So, thank you very, very much for watching. Let me put this down. Okay, it wants to roll around. Let's put it there then. I hope that you found this video relaxing. And I hope you learned something new today. And I hope that you have a very good